about this episode. Last one was a lot of fun going over all that, but gangs is just such a fun topic, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Post that. All right. People can hear us, but they can't see us yet.
Oh, snap.
So yeah, watch your fucking mouth, dude. Be cool. Be
Uh,
cool.
Bro, be cool.
Chill.
Let him hear green room shit.
Yeah.
This is the part where we shit talk other people in the community, right?
Oh
Live.
All right, there's a guy named Not Bob on NCS. He's a fucker. I hope
Yeah,
he's
I
in the
hate that
chat.
guy.
Cyberpunk Uncensored.
Perk logs in to hear me cussing at a mutual friend. Good, good.
Hey, we're live. Now people can see us too. Yeah, I noticed that too. Hey, PWB's in there too. Hey. All right, cool. Yeah, let's get this going. This is the second episode of Night City Live. The first one we went over places, things, and services of Night City. Anybody that missed that live stream, you can check out the archived VOD on the Cyberpunk Uncensored YouTube channel. This live stream will also be there probably in a few days or so. I try to keep that updated pretty quick. But yeah, as you see, I've got some guests with me. Before we get into this episode, this one's going to be all about gangs, about, you know, booster gangs, poser gangs, custom gangs, all the gangs of Night City during the time of Cyberpunk Red. Plus some creative ones, like I said, some custom ideas. But before we get into that, let's have each one of my guests here kind of introduce yourselves. What's up, Zeppy? I see you in the chat. Lobster Falcon, you're back. You were with me on the first episode. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody? Let everybody know who you are and what you do.
Hey everybody, so I'm Lobster Falcon from the living community Night City Stories, which is a Cyberpunk Red living community, kind of West Marches style game. We are the largest living community for Cyberpunk Red around right now, and had I think we had 47 games in January across about 25 different GMs. So we are the place to be if you want to find some West March style Cyberpunk Red. You can find us at Reddit/r/Night City Stories, or you can find us on a Discord, which I will hope somebody will drop a link in the stream chat.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I see in the chat here it froze. Yeah, it seemed to. I had to refresh our program here, and we got us back. So no stresses. The audio continued on though, so nobody missed anything. And yeah, in the archived version and in this, once we're done, I can't do it during the stream, but once it's all done, I'm gonna drop links in the description so everybody can keep up to date with everything. But Joseph Carruthers, aka Tormented by Gnomes, from Do Not Peak Entertainment.
Do not peek.
Yeah,
I know you want to take that one-on-one duel, but do not peek that corner.
Yeah, give everyone a breakdown of who you are and what you got going on.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone watching us live and everyone watching in the dark future. I'm Tormented by Gnomes. My name is Joseph. I'm a producer at Do Not Peak Entertainment. It's a sort of all-in-one house, does a lot of esports content, does a lot of in-studio content, or will when, you know, the carbon plague is gone. I am the game master in residence over at Do Not Peak. I'm the game master for a show called Red Sky City, which features talent from the esports community. We've got Golden Boy, the original Whatface, on that show, a couple of other folks. It's a lot of fun. We just wrapped up our second phase. All the VODs are up on YouTube, and we're getting into our third phase of the story in a couple of weeks. So I've been running Red for, 6 months? Something like that. I didn't have a lot of background in the Cyberpunk 2020 system beforehand, but I went all in, and I'm having a lot of fun. I did the GM Roundtable with Rob and company a few weeks ago, and I'm glad to be back.
Oh yeah, nice. And I'm glad to have you back. You were there with me on the last month's GM Roundtable episode, and that was a lot of fun, and we'll be hanging again soon. So yeah, and I see you, Renegade. You made it in the chat. That's great. And yeah, just to answer a couple questions in there, nobody missed too much. We literally just got started with some introductions, and then we're going to get into it. I'm Rob Mulligan. I'm basically the founder of Cyberpunk Uncensored. I do live gameplay every Wednesday. We host other GMs. I do interviews, series like this one and a bunch of other ones, GM tips, Cyberpunk Red crash course tutorials, all kinds of shit. I also got the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord and group going and kind of expanded our team and community into a free stuff or assets blog. You can check that out on our site and get a bunch of cool stuff like auto-calculating fillable character sheets and NPC sheets, GM screens, just all kinds of stuff. But yeah, let's get into today's episode. I have my Night City shirt on once again, so I'm ready to go. I always try to rock a different Cyberpunk shirt. I know it's cheesy, but fuck it, I love it. So yeah, Night City Live. This episode's all about gangs. So we're going to basically focus on the gangs of Cyberpunk Red. And anybody in chat, if you have ideas or things to contribute or questions, feel free to drop it in there. We always love to incorporate that into the stream. Other than that, Lobster Falcon, just like the other episode, why don't you take it from here? We'll kind of go down that list. You can do the blurb, and then we can all kind of talk about it.
Sweet. So if you want to follow along, we're on page 308 of the Cyberpunk Red core book. So we're going to start off with the 6th Street Gangers. Born from the many veterans of the Fourth Corporate War, the 6th Street is a vigilante gang which protects various neighborhoods around Night City. Members of the 6th Street are generally well-armed and heavily cybered up with armament from their days in the field. Recently, they've been forced to move into extortion and smuggling in efforts to pay the bills. While they operate all throughout the city, the 6th Street are all welcome protectors of the Holy Angels Church.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like the sound of this game. I like, ironically it starts because this is an alphabetical order. This starts with the number. But this one, just like, a couple others, they just stand out to me because of being that sort of Guardian Angels style. I don't know if anybody remembers that gang back in the 90s or whenever, 80s. And, that gang out in New York, they're in major cities in the U.S. kind of protecting people on subways from real bad gangs. They're still kind of acted like a gang or whatever. But that's what they remind me of, They're a gang, but they're kind of good, I guess.
It's one of those things that that's really important to understand is that gangs are just not faceless people to be murdered, but they exist within an environment. And so 6th Street is going to really represent the group of people who are disaffected by society, who still know how to organize and use force to support a community. And so you see the little blurb in there that they moved into extortion and smuggling to pay the bills, because everybody's got to eat. But at the end of the day, they're a type of gang that you can use in your gang that represents more good interests in terms of what you're pursuing on your table.
Yeah, I feel like it more protective. Yeah, definitely. What were you going to say, Joseph?
In Red Sky City, one of the characters is a fixer who recently took out Rex. Rex is the fixer in the book who's supposed to be keeping the combat zone in line, deciding where the combat zone ends and begins. And since Rex is gone, our fixer is forming a coalition of gangs to sort of establish a new order to maintain some sense of, bounding inside the combat zone so they don't leak over. And one of the gangs that they brought in was 6th Street, because 6th Street has an invested interest in making sure that sort of violence doesn't spill out. The interesting question that I would pull from this description right here, there are sort of two main themes I'd want to go with. One is, as veterans, this gives you an opportunity to bring the various corporate wars and conflicts into your story, bring them into Night City. There's some lore about the conflict in Central and Southern America, and all the veterans that were sort of just abandoned out there and left to make their way, what was it called, the Long Walk or the Death March, all the way back into the States. So this gives you an opportunity to have these folks who know how to organize. It's a great example of the trope of the veteran who does not know how to reassimilate back into civilian life, but still wants to make a difference. So you're going to be dealing with people who are extremely good at fighting, who have military grade gear, who have a lot of trauma that they're working through, and are going to be dangerous because of their training and the degree to which they're willing to, act in order to protect the people they see as under their protection. Here's my question for my fellow GMs. Who are they extorting? If they're a protection gang, if they're trying to protect neighborhoods, who's the target of their extortion and what are they smuggling?
Yeah.
So I think smuggling's an easy one, right? Any kind of gang that's operating outside of lawlessness is going to be smuggling against the NCPD and customs and things like that. And that could be anything from, illicit drugs to moving people unawares to bringing guns in, right? Like when you're a gang, selling guns to other people in the area is probably not that big of a deal, especially when you're the big fish. Now, the extortion is an interesting point.
I think so too.
Because when they say that they're doing this to pay the bills, is it the economic realities of trying to live in the dark future is making them prey upon the people that they protect? That's a cool story hook in and of itself, a division within the gang. Or is it they are the bigger fish amongst other gangs who they're extorting?
Yeah, like the Dagon Master in chat just said, maybe extorting all of those extortionists,
Right. I think that if you missed out on a chance, like you were just saying, Lobster, to bring some ambiguity in here, then you're missing out on an interesting story hook. But go ahead, I cut you off.
Oh, no worries. I had two things. One, I was going to say, Perkinji in the chat is mentioning, I've heard a few people playing lawman as a gang lieutenant who can call on backup rather than a police officer.
Love that.
6th Street makes a really great gang member for that to be a part of, to still be the punk in Cyberpunk where you're fighting against bigger objects and not just being, the shit ass who's killing people. But I want to help my community, and so along with, serving my turf, I also do edge runs, and I can call on the boys to go lay a beat down when I need to.
Yeah. Now I was gonna say the other thing too. Is this the one? Is this the one that mentions the Church of Angels or whatever it says?
The Holy Angels
that's
Church.
Something worth pointing out too. Is not many of them mention like territory. I noticed that there's not like distinct stuff, and this one definitely mentions that. So you can at least assume that they're over there in what is that, Little Europe, wherever that church is. Isn't that where that is?
Yeah, it's Little Europe. So
that's one thing to kind of point out too, is that this one gives a bit more direction when they drop that name, and also anybody that noticed the sounds we have going on here in the background of the stream. Shout out to Sirenscape, one of our sponsors. We like to drop the Night City sounds going on while we do Night City Live. So, but yeah, this one actually mentions the location. I think that's pretty cool.
Something that was also brought up in chat was a crime ecosystem. This is a segue that I will take at literally any point. One of the things that's really interesting when you think about gangs specifically and crime is about how a gang fits into an ecosystem within the world, right? And so gangs generally, if you think of them as predators and prey, right? As the number of predators increases, the number of prey will go down, and when it reaches a certain point, the number of predators has to go down, right? So when there's a lot of people and no gangs, the number of gangs is going to grow. When the number of gangs grows, the number of innocent people or the number of people eligible to be preyed upon as gangs take territory decreases. When you have gangs like 6th Street who are operating off of protecting people and getting things like that, they are either going to be, and if you're not being simulationist, but having cool story hooks about it, if they are preying, trying to extract the same wealth in a different way in terms of protection money literally versus other gangs, they're going to be pushed by different things on economic realities of surviving. So really think about if you have a 6th Street heavy, and just think about the crime ecosystem in your world. When things happen to the places, areas, when things happen to the areas that gangs protect, what is the impact upstream on that gang? How might that affect their recruiting, their money, all sorts of other things like that, and who they protect might shift just based on those realities.
Yeah, and I see Aqua here in the chat saying in Cyberpunk 2077 in a 6th Street gang site, there's a shard showing that the current leader of the 6th Street son got kidnapped by former Netwatch agents, so he sends his to save him and free every other prisoner kept by.
There you go.
Think we just lost light. I'm gonna try to get a light back on, but yeah, if somebody wants to comment on that.
Yeah,
I don't recall seeing that part.
I'm actually the worst reference. I have not yet played 2077, mostly because I don't play release video games until 6 to 8 months after they're released. But it's yeah, that's I mean that let's see, Six Street.
But yeah, no, definitely, it sounds more like along those lines of being still gang, still like it says, doing what they need to do to survive, but still hired on I don't know the more moral side of black ops activity, I guess you could say. Like they just seem like leaning more on that side, so you can definitely be focused towards that. But yeah, I got the light back. I was in the dark there just for a minute. Mr. Bind. I like calling him that, even though it's PWB. We talked about that before. All right, next gang. Let's push this along.
All right,
here we go.
On to everybody's local favorite, the Bozos. So when they first appeared, the Bozos were just a prankster gang, biosculpted to look like circus clowns with red bulbous noses, wild red hair, and long flat feet. No, not shoes. And costumed to the part, the Bozos became impromptu slapstick. But soon the Bozos became the ultimate killer clown gang. People living on Bozo turf learned the hard way that if you see a pack of Bozos, just run. Bozos enjoy playing on people's greatest fears, lurking in apartments in the dark, locking victims in small spaces filled with rats, stopping elevators midway and filling them with water. They are not funny.
Yeah.
I have a special place in my heart for the Bozos. When we started our game and our show, I was introducing, our players were new to the world of Cyberpunk. And so I was introducing them to some of the lore and just explaining some of the things going on. And one of the things that always stands out is if you look at the lore of the universe from like the earlier editions, the 2020 edition to Cyberpunk Red and ultimately to 2077, you can see this progression where it was very much rooted in the weirdness of the time, right? It's always whatever is the weirdness of the time. By 2077, the gangs are acting pretty, I'd say, normal. They all represent more what we'd expect in real life taken to its extreme. But especially in 2020, there's a lot more of that Mad Max 80s style, Gangs of New York, Batman, villainy going on. You've got poser gangs, and we're going to get into some more of these as we go on. So if I'm thinking about what's the weird stuff of Cyberpunk, the Bozos leap immediately to the page. So I brought them up. The players latched onto those ideas and kept incorporating the Bozos into their backstory. So they've been a recurring theme throughout the entire show. And I have done my best to make them, and I don't know that this would be the best approach. I'm willing to bet that in Night City Stories, things may work a little bit differently. I think we've sort of been leaning into the extreme aspect of it. I've been doing my best to just make them inhuman, alien, and terrifying. Like, they have a process by which they turn people into Bozos. They subject them to brain dances and involuntary biosculpting, and they almost Borg you into one of them. They've got twisted rituals. They operate out of an abandoned theme park. They use psychoactive drugs. I've just done as much as I can to make them creepy and disturbing, so that any time clown music plays, the entire party shudders and freaks out.
Oh yeah.
The direct opposite of what you said. I personally like to use the Bozos when I need absolute sicko shit. Just the worst possible thing of deranged subhuman violence that doesn't necessarily need to make sense, but violence for its own gratuitous sake. That's when I want the Bozos. And it's interesting hearing your description of the Bozos in terms of their recruitment. The description that I was pitching for Bozo recruitment was almost the same thing, but torment until people snapped. So the scenario that I built up a while back was Bozos find an apartment building with 5 people in it, start tormenting all of them in escalating more and more ways, hiding under their bed and scaring them with knives, moving into, putting drugs into their water, making sure that they can't sleep, exposing them to all this stuff. And after months of just driving these people to the actual edge, giving each one of them a knife and saying whoever comes back with their nose gets to join the Bozos. And get to play things like Got Your Nose, but take clown tropes and make them really weird, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the type of thing that I'm looking to use Bozos for. But Go
I
ahead,
think
bro.
definitely. No, I was gonna say definitely leaning on the tormenting, the harassment side of things, and then the twisted versions of clown stuff, whether you're using pies and squirting flowers, but replacing with things that can cause damage and do fucked up things or weird stuff, or graffitiing the vehicle, all their player's vehicle all polka dot, yellow and pink polka dot and things, and they always come out and there's like helium balloons, and you can do clowny stuff but make it tormented and then mix it in with that real sick fucked up stuff. But I love your idea of tormenting to the point of driving them in. I love Joseph's idea of forcing in and torturing and the brain dance and all that way in. And then from the chat, I see Gonzo here, who's Eric. He plays Coupler, our tech in our Wednesday stream that we do 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But he said, killer clowns from outer space makes a great reference for Bozos to the extreme and the kind of crime they commit. Oh, I totally agree. And then Dagon Master, all the humanity lost from body sculpting probably drove them psycho, but then Gonzo replied they were probably already crazy. And I have to lean towards that, but then I also see Joseph's side of it. So, I think it depends on how the GM plays it. Are they body sculpting and brain dancing and doing fucked up stuff to make the humanity loss and torment and make them psycho and turn them into that? Or is it more along the lines of, these are psychos to begin with that like self-body sculpted to be that crazy killer clown from outer space style? But no matter what, I also think out of all the gangs, this is, well, the first because alphabetically they're listed. But, one of the main poser gangs that they list in that sense of the body sculpting and kind of theming the gang to look like something weird or being along those lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One of the things that Zeppi also brought up that I think is really relevant with the Bozos is he says this is an angle that I feel is not done enough. It's easy to write them off as psychotic. It's even better to tell the players why they turn deranged. So if you think about it, you can use the Bozos as an allegory for the cycle of abuse, which happens today, right? The abusers are most likely people who were abused. The Bozos play that out at a grand scale, right? Like, is Night City so abusive that it takes these people and turns them into sickos, and by the virtue of the environment, makes those people now that infection vector to force other people to be sickos, right? Like, you can use that as a story about, if you are Cyberpunk trying to clean up Night City, right? Can you stop that cycle of abuse? Or can you slow it down a little bit, right? You might not always win against the inertia, but can you make it a little bit better?
They're also, if you look at most of the gangs, and I know we're immediately going to go into a highly ideological gang up next, but if you look at most of the gangs, you can at least understand them, right? Okay, mutual protection, ego, pride, identity, money, power. Like they all operate on things we can understand, even if they're really, really dangerous. We get what they're going after. The Bozos are one of the most esoteric and difficult to understand because they're not really operating on a normal profit scale. You could run a game about where their money comes for all those nifty toys and acid pies they get, but they also sort of exist as this extreme outlier of that cycle of abuse that doesn't really fit in to the normal ecosystem.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I think it's that unpredictability and non-reasoning or whatever that you can't define their motivations as easy, that makes them extra scary and dangerous, because that which is confusing is obvious, is kind of scary when it's led by violence and torment and all that shit. It's like, what the hell? So that's awesome. And I saw in the chat, I don't know who said it first, but they said, it was PWB, water balloons filled with phosphorus that ignite as it drives. I love that. And then Gonzo saying, balloon animals handed out to kids filled with toxic gas. Yep, that's definitely Bozo style. But what were you gonna say?
On last stream, I think I mentioned the Bozo Jack in the Boxes. I
love that idea. That's a great campaign idea. Yeah, to drop those in.
So, you might not have heard it, Joseph. My favorite dumb thing to include with Bozos is Jack in the Box, which is a human-sized crate where they have attached a person in who's still alive and wired a car battery to them. So when you turn the crank 3 times, it turns the car battery on, so they pop up screaming, electrified.
I bestow upon you the greatest honor one GM can bestow on another. Yoink!
That's the type of... I think Cyberpunk Red is really endemic with the opportunity to do gritty cinematic, which is the opposite of like gritty simulationist, while you can be campy and still gritty at the same time, which is cool with the setting.
Absolutely.
So what's the next one? Let's hit the next one.
All right. The next one is another popular one, the Inquisitors. The Inquisitors are a cult gang. Like the hate gangs, they center on a specific ideology, in this case religious. The Inquisitors think cyberware is blasphemous and think that nothing of tearing it right out of your body. They consider this saving your soul. Not only do they believe that cybernetics are evil, but they also have a war going on with every other gang in the city. Everyone hates these guys.
Yeah, I recently put them in one of my sessions. I had the wandering DM Simon came over and played a rocker boy with our team for a session, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had the Inquisitors kind of attacking them. They were basically trying to recover this lost cargo from Rockland because these two Aerozeps collided over the city, causing chaos over the city. Everybody trying to get the washed up cargo and all the free shit that scattered, and they were trying to get one from a club and hold it down in the club while either somebody could show up to drive it out of there, or what they did, hijacked a vehicle to get it out of there. But while holding it down, the Inquisitors came. The club owners sold them out. Inquisitors, all being anti-cyberware and all that, obviously they wanted to destroy that and the team and all that stuff. So that was a lot of fun. But I think they're an interesting gang because you can lean into the more, I don't know, not cheesy, but more like I said, cultist style things. They can be a little more dramatic in the things that they say and do and whatever, because they're not as driven by, like, I don't know, dealing drugs and extortion and typical gang stuff. They don't even have a set turf. They like go around typically and do whatever they want. All gangs hate them. You know what I mean? Because they're against everybody with cyberware. So I don't know. They're pretty interesting. Have you guys used them before, or what do you think about them?
I actually ran an Inquisitor game last night.
Nice.
Yeah. The important thing, and Perk puts in the chat again, one of the interesting bits of 2020 lore that pushes forward with the Inquisitors is, remember that the Inquisitors are hyper competent, as equipped as Max Tech without cyberware, skilled, and they're incredibly sophisticated organizationally.
They'd have to be.
Yeah, and when you really think about the Inquisitors, I don't even think of them as a gang. I think of them much more so as a terrorist network operating in cells. They're in it for ideological purposes, not necessarily for money, though they do have money-generating enterprises to continue the pursuit of ideology. Like the game last night was, I started off the run coroneting blue, kidnapping 2 players, and putting them into a torturing brain dance that was conditioning them to hate cyberware as part of a training program to take a benevolent therapy AI and make it into an AI that makes anybody who it's attached to hate cyberware. They're trying to purge cyberware out at a mimetic scale rather than a physical scale. And so those are the type of plots that I see the Inquisitors doing, not just like random cyber snatching, where they probably also do that as like part of their funds, but also, what can they do at scale to poison the well, and not in their mind, to heal the rift that cyberware has caused within humanity.
Yeah, I like how Not Bob put in there too. You never know who, on that level, playing it like that, you never know who is an Inquisitor either. They could be your local politician or respected community member. Yeah, definitely. If you lean into it on that side of things, and less creepy cultist vibe of anti-cyberware and more of this terrorist, individual cells and all that. I love that idea, Not Bob, of expanding it to that point. That's really interesting. Joseph, have you used the Inquisitors in any games, or?
I haven't. The first time that I read through them, it was like this. It makes sense that this is part of the world, but it also sort of has a Deus Ex Human Revolution feel to it, where the issue of augmentation isn't really something I want to. The way that it changes people is something I want to explore in my games. Mm-hmm. But I also feel that it would be an extremely niche belief system because of the advantages offered by cyberware. And if there's anything we know, it's that if a group can get an advantage, they're going to take it. And at first I was like, okay, yeah, you're going to run into people. They're going to grab you. They're going to rip out all your cyberware. It'll be gruesome. It'll be nasty, low-level cultist encounters. I wasn't familiar with the lore about them being absolute badasses. which makes sense because if your first reaction is how the hell do they survive in a world where everyone else is modded, that it's either they don't or they're really freaking good at it. I also like the idea of them, like that brain dance mimetic war is fantastic. I think that their sophisticated plot lines would involve getting positions of power and harming cybernetics companies at a high level. Like, don't just grab some schmuck and tear out their chrome. Get into Rockland and implant viruses at the highest level in order to mess with things and cause people to change their faith, etc. I think there's a lot of exploration you could do about why they believe this. What's their source of information? How religious is it? What do they tell each other? And what are their supply lines? One of the questions I'm going to bring up for every single gang is like, where do they get their money? Because they gotta to fund all this.
Yeah, I was just going to say the other thing, like if aside from sabotaging, cyberware companies and things and going on that bigger level, I could see them, trying to destroy supply chains and, nomad packs that are traveling for corps and supply chains for them that deal with cyberware. If it's going on that level. And yeah, what's up, Big Val, my beautiful wife, Val Mulligan in the chat, who plays Raven the solo in our Wednesday weekly. That's awesome. Glad you could, I guess, take a break from work and join us for a moment. But yeah, moving on. What's the next gang on the list?
All right. So after the Inquisitors, we have the Iron Sights. The Iron Sights are a relatively small but surprisingly tough combat gang of borderline cyber psychos. Once funded by Arasaka, they fell on hard times after the war, but word in the street is they have a new benefactor are once more flexing their rippers. So the Iron Sights are a gang I've never used, and I don't know if I've heard anybody use them before, but I think they overlap a little bit with kind of the Maelstrom feel of the big, chromed up cyber psycho thug gang. What do y'all think?
Well, I think it's interesting that them and
after you.
Tiger Claws. Well, I just wanted to point out one thing. They're mentioned as being backed by Arasaka at one time, so it almost seems like the conflict of interest between gangs. And obviously, we can go back to 2020 and talk details about things like that. But just the underlining sort of conflict of having gangs like that, maybe it's a type of thing where one is more elite street or protective of Japantown, which is kind of how they describe. Not that we're up to the Tiger Claws yet. But maybe this one a bit more on the dangerous side. But regardless, mentioning Arasaka, I just wanted to point that out, that there's a couple gangs here that they do mention were, and this is one of them. But Joseph, what were you going to say?
If you look at the Iron Sights, just their name alone and the fact that they were apparently funded, controlled, etc. by Arasaka, I think it brings up the division between the different types of gangs. We know poser gangs they all biomod themselves to resemble something in particular. But aside from just being really good at fighting and really violent, what makes a combat gang a combat gang? What is their reason for existing? Because Maelstrom, we get a very good portrayal of Maelstrom in 2077. They seem to be, aside from the hardcore cybernetics, they're just acting like a gang. They control territory, they sell drugs, they raise revenue, they have rivals for territory and power. I would use Iron Sights 1. They make an appearance in Red Chrome Cargo, the free adventure that was released as part of a larger power struggle. And given that their name is based on weaponry, it seems to me like they're almost more of a mercenary gang. They would be more involved in merc work, but from a non-corporate side. They might be for hire. They used to just be Arasaka muscle, so they're comfortable in this position of being the muscle for somebody else who pulls their purse strings.
Yeah,
and by themselves, they don't have a lot of ideology. They just focus on being good at shooting and not taking crap from anybody.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
the other thing, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I saw you put in chat. We'll see too if somebody puts a blurb there from 2020, because I think it was Zeppy, who's getting ready to GM for Cyberpunk Uncensored. Will probably get his stream going sometime in the upcoming weeks or days. We'll see how quick. But he does say Iron Sights, I believe, are numbered at like 40 in the 2020 rule book. So regardless, however they come about with, as Red progresses, I do think that the description is fairly similar in that sense. Obviously in Red, it's all post, this is, they were funded by Arasaka because of obviously everything that went down, that brought us to Red. But what were you going to say there?
Gonzo actually Gonzo in chat just made the point that I was going to make. Is I see the Iron Sights as being the muscle on the street for Arasaka when they don't want to risk their corporate assets or as a new recruit pool. I like to imagine, let's say you're, Arasaka spec ops, and you're in Japan, and you commit a crime, and you're sent to high security jail, and Arasaka says, "Hey, I've got a way for you to be free, but it's going to involve a little bit of time in Night City." And maybe you start collecting some real bad, real hard people from Japan and start moving them slowly over into Night City, where you have a group of beholden to you, highly skilled people who can be deniable assets. That's I think a good hook if you want a gang that might be executing on corporate interests, but the connection isn't really explicit in your story.
Right. No, exactly, and I think the whole the fact that it's post Arasaka funded style, it definitely leads into that being open to be hired and kind of possibly played that way in the campaign. So I love that.
Anyone have any commentary on Iron Sights in the chat?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if there was more from the 2020, but how it develops. But regardless, let's move on. If something pops, we can always backtrack and make mentions. But yeah, what's the next one?
Cool. Everybody's favorite from 2027, Maelstrom. The combat gang formed around the remnants of the old Metal Warriors, a gang virtually wiped out in one night by the Inquisitors. It later drafted members of the Red Chrome Legion and Ironsights, who also had violent personal grudges against the Inquisitors. Post-war, Maelstrom settled another long-running feud with a smaller gang of cyber psychos and began to adopt some of their old rivals' meat-hating philosophies, leading to an almost exponential increase in visible and extreme cyberware among gang members. This, in turn, has only increased the number and intensity of the battles between Maelstrom and the Inquisitors.
Yeah, I always picture these guys. I mean, obviously, yeah, everyone's favorite. They're all cybered out and not scared to show it. They're cyber psycho borderline style gang. They've got the multiple cyber eye stuff going on, and just really extreme, and it's fun and exciting. But there's some underlining thing here that I always picture, at least half of the members of that gang are neo-Nazi fascists, even if they're ex or whatever, or from the Red Chrome
Legion.
Yeah, because so I picture at least half, because what did they got them recruited from them, and what was the other one?
Ironsights.
Yeah, so at least half of them are coming from that Nazi background or belief system or whatever. So not only extreme with the cyber psycho side, but the fact that half of them are like that and the other half tolerates that half of them are like that, and they all get along to be in a gang like that. It just shows me that it's going to be, the potential, if your session 0 allows it and people don't think it's too real life or touchy, some options of pushing some racist stuff going on, or some fascist stuff, or potential post neo-Nazi conflict or idealism, maybe not fully onto that, but it can have a little tone of that with these guys. They just seem kind of grimy dangerous with that when it comes to that shit.
What's interesting about them is that they specifically hate meat. So, if you're going into this idea of this extreme ideology, which the Red Chrome Legion, we're going to get to them in a bit, their ideology, I think, is deliberately left very vague. But I think that you could say that the ones who would gravitate towards Maelstrom are the ones who have an ideology. It's not just that they like cyberware, they have an ideology of cyberware. They have an ideology of improvement and the frailty of meat. So you can start to think about what would drive somebody to act that way, what would motivate someone to act that way. And if they pull people from these different groups, they're going to bring bits and pieces of their ideology with them. But these are the people who are attracted to the idea of just being absolutely as chromed up as possible. They also, I think, act as... They're a combat gang, but again, they're sort of more involved in traditional criminal enterprises, even though they're willing to enact extreme violence. The wiki has them doing illegal sales of medicine, weapons, and hit jobs. So I think they're pretty easy to incorporate into a campaign, and they're fertile ground for a GM who's really looking to make the cyberware aspect of the future take forward stage.
They're also they are in some cases the mirror image of the Inquisitors, right? A cult of cyberware versus a cult of flesh,
right?
And it's another good use of kind of the just because there's two sides doesn't mean there's a good guy and a bad guy in every argument, right? There can sometimes just be people with opinions, and most of them are bad for the people on the ground as they get stomped on in some war. But you can use that as an opportunity to explore, like, if there's a war between Inquisitors and Maelstrom, do the players care? Do the players, want to embrace that pursuit of being fully chromed out, of riding that line of 12 empathy to see if you can get by, or do you embrace the Inquisitor push against that maybe the loss of humanity is actually part of what is making the world less stable due to the presence of cybernetics over time? Or maybe you just hate both these guys because they shoot people and commit crimes.
If we go back to the previous thing we were talking about with the Inquisitors, if you play the Inquisitors as an extremely elite, adept group of social manipulators and social engineers who are operating in cells at this very big picture level, and the Maelstrom as a ground level but with excellent hackers and sophisticated tech, etc., and you show this conflict, you could easily create a situation where at first the PCs are saying, oh, Maelstrom bad, they're chromed out, they're super violent, they're doing all this bad shit. And then they find out what the Inquisition is trying to do, and it's this huge plan that involves brainwashing people, breaking therapy AI, like you said, and giving viruses that are going to cripple or kill thousands. And suddenly they're saying, well, crap, I don't want to help these, chromed out maniacs, but at the same time, this is really complicated.
Right.
Well, that's kind of a fun tidbit. They're immune to tear gas because none of them have eyes.
Yeah, I saw that. No, definitely. And I think it leaves good opportunity. I mean, obviously, you can argue any gang, booster, poser, custom, whatever you can make, on whatever level of stats and skills and weaponry and whatever they have to make them, a difficult opponent or an easy target or whatever. But I think Maelstrom always leans into, those advanced character encounters. If they're kicking a lot of ass, they at least give you options to load them the fuck up with cyberware, put a couple cyber psychos in that gang, you know what I mean, and make it a force to be reckoned with. If your teams are that strong and things like that, they at least, in my mind, leave that option wide open because of their philosophy when it comes to cyberware and such.
Yeah.
All right, what's next on the list? Right. Unless you want, what did Zeppy say? Because I see, like Joseph said. It would be interesting to me to play them in any other way, as they are so disadvantaged with their lack of cyberware, so making them involved in... Wait, so that's not about... That has to be about...
it was referring to the Inquisitors.
Inquisitors, yeah, sorry. Yeah, when I started reading, I was like, no, Maelstrom has lots of cyberware. What? No. I was confused for a moment. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, totally. I agree. Inquisitors, yeah. Thanks, Zeppy. All right, yeah. What's the next one?
Cool. The next one is the Philharmonic Vampires. The Vamps are a prankster gang who were dubbed the Philharmonic Vampires a few decades ago when 5 members clad in tuxedos, capes, and vampire teeth flew upon wires behind the Night City Symphony on Halloween night. Are they artists, hoodlums, social commentators? Are those teeth part of the costume or not? Who knows?
I picture these like cheesy preppy drama kids trying to get attention, and now they're like, ah, shit, we're getting attention. Time to become a gang, I guess, or something. I don't know. What do you guys feel about them?
I think you can go a lot of different ways with your personal interpretation of the Philharmonic Vampires. Yeah, so you can. I tend to think of them not as a violent gang at all, but closer to the Valentinos, and more so about almost Banksy style art pranks with criminal elements. Think of dramatic heists. Think of social commentary art. Imagine something like stealing the necklace of some movie star right before she goes on stage and replacing it with something that melts dramatically and lots
of graffiti and destroying some public plaque or statue or property right before they're about to reveal it or something. They do things. It definitely, like I said, has that sort of like preppy prank, like they're that end of gang. I hate saying it, but on that end of social justice warrior style, because I hate incorporating real life stuff. But if there was that cheesy end of it, like trying to make a difference, but on that criminal side and doing stuff behind to make the point. They'd be on that end of the spectrum, but I picture like bringing in some social aspect, like, you know, trying to make a point against, you know, government or something along those lines.
I feel like whatever point they make would be really obtuse, you know, sort of this says a lot about society of gangs, and really elaborate, big setups, you know, clearly very artistic, but everyone's sort of left saying, like, what exactly are they trying to say here? You know, the sort of stuff that feels deeper than it actually is. I took a look at the wiki because it's one of the easiest sources to pull, and apparently, I can't hard confirm this, they hate mimes.
Oh, I wonder why.
So, like, you know, I guess they would hate low art. I think you could go a lot with, if you went and watched Now You See Me, the Now You See Me movies, and then ran the Philharmonic Vampires, I think you'd be in the right state of mind.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Yeah, and like
Deshaun
Gonzo says, they're very avant-garde. What were we going to say?
Like Deshaun in the chat gives a great example of the type of prank that I see endemic to them, which is, I like the example of them driving by in an NCPD car and shooting money out the back of it as it rains amongst people, only for the money to realize it's counterfeit and the rain washes away the money in people's hands. That's that type of like obtuse prank Joseph was talking about. You know, there's some kind of weird commentary on capitalism and the police, and mostly it just annoys you and draws headlines. Like, that's kind of what I see as
causes a traffic jam or whatever they're doing. You know, like I definitely like that. It's that level of pranking. You know,
nobody's sure what the prank was supposed to say, but they're all high-fiving each other back in their headquarters about making people think.
Right. Yeah. All right, cool. What's next on the list?
Sorry, one thing in terms of using Philharmonic Vampires. If you wanted to explore maybe a more complex aspect of them, think with always these gangs, think about people and think about divisions. So let's say somebody, you know, they're primarily doing jokes and pranks, and maybe they're primarily made of high society people doing these things. But what if there's somebody in it who wants it to have more of an explicit purpose? What if they're visualizing themselves more as vigilantes, where they have to do something rather than just comment on it? Or vice versa. What if somebody says, this is our opportunity to make money? The Philharmonics could easily be a commentary on power plays, with, especially if they are made of people with money, hiring edgerunners to facilitate their power plays within what is considered to most people a joke gang. And yes, Banksy gang. That's exactly how I think.
That, yeah.
One last thing you made me think about this, Lobster, is they hire, through a fixer, anonymously, they hire the edgerunners to do something really weird and obtuse with no deliberate purpose. And it's the sort of thing that makes you feel like, oh, I'm the pawn in a corporate conspiracy. Like, clearly, the fact that I was supposed to go to these coordinates, flip these valves, and then leave this letter with a black rose in this spot, like, I'm involved in some high-tier corporate sabotage. But what you don't realize is that you are just the patsy to execute their latest art project.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot. High society pranksters fighting the goons who want to LARP. That's from not Bob. Yeah. All right, what's the next one?
All right, the next up are the Piranhas. The Piranhas are a typical party gang. They party, drink smash, take and deal drugs, mug people. All of it is part of a just because lifestyle. To these guys, the party is everything. So with the Piranhas, on the previous episode of Night City Live, we talked a little bit about the University District. The Piranhas I see are a group that is going to heavily involve themselves in the University District. They're going to be where, they're going to be a lot of a lot of, selling medium weight drugs to people, possibly, running brothels or escort services to college kids, selling cut Nova Coke, on a corner, throwing, arranging big parties at the frat house, and mostly just being belligerent hoodlums. And I just like the University District as that setting, whereas like these are the people who we can make the most money off of doing this. But that type of party gang you can insert anywhere you want to, that's not explicitly controlled by another gang with bigger guns.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, I mean, you said everything that I was going to say when it comes to the whole bruh and like, you know, that whole mentality of them, and Zeppi saying literal poser, like not poser and augmenting and trying to be something, but literal like poser in the sense like, you know, bros and, you know, that style of people trying to be actual gang, but really it's like you said, it kind of that college town gang, or like you know, dealing with that as the clientele, but a real gang would come in and really probably mess them up pretty bad. But yeah, I definitely agree. I think I look at them the same way, but I think just summing it up with the whole bruh thing, I think does well. Bruh, let's kick this homeless dude. He's so old. Sick, bruh. Exactly. That's what Perkin there said. I think that's the name. Yeah, Perkin in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that kind of sums it up. Gonzo, I see them as a gang you want to throw at your team in a club or on the street, but don't want them to go full gun blazing. But a street fight and brawl, exactly, or maybe like a standoff or something, and it's an easy win. Like, yeah, I would definitely they're not going to be one of the ones that's like super difficult for a team to mess up, unless, you know, you catch a bunch of them and just by sheer numbers it's annoying or something. But they definitely don't come across like a real brutal, serious gang, you know. More party.
Go ahead. Every gang in the rulebook, and really every single piece of lore that they give us, can be used in a couple of different ways. And I think the easiest way to use a gang like the Piranhas is as window dressing, where it's a chance encounter that sort of brings the city to life, helps you explain what this place is like to your players. But if you want to go a little bit further with a serious plot hook, have somebody important get involved in one of the Piranhas' parties and go missing, or something happens to them. You know, the rich heir of some corpo family is out, you know, living, partying on the street, doing hard drugs, etc., running with the bad crowd, and then goes missing or gets their kidney stolen or something, and enter the edgerunners. Were the Piranhas in on it? Were they hapless dupes? What's going on?
Yeah. The gosh, what was I? Sorry, go ahead.
That's it for me.
We'll wait.
Oh.
What were we gonna say?
We'll
wait.
Damn it, Rob. For the Piranhas, they are going to be. Whoa. In the exact same way with the Philharmonics, like Joseph was saying, you can definitely explore how they're, you know, what they're doing and how they're moving about. You can also explore divisions within them, like, are people trying to push them to be more hardcore? Are people in the gang trying to take control and make money off of them? Are people just trying to, you know, party and grill? And the Piranhas also bring up another good point, which is I've seen a couple of GMs, you know, newer GMs do this, but this is the type of group where if you get in a fight with them, they're not fighting to the death, right? Like, remember, they're going to hit seriously wounded, and most people hit seriously wounded. They're going to try and surrender or run.
Yeah, one's definitely going to say, like, dude, don't you know who my dad is? You know, like, or something. There's going to be some, like, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, dude, call the cops. Like, you know,
yeah.
Bruh, call the cops. All right. What's next? What's next on? Would you finish? Did you have thoughts to finish? Sorry.
No, that was just more of a general commentary. Like, when you're running gangs, just make sure to understand, like, Maelstrom are probably going to fight longer, right? But they're not necessarily suicidal. But the Inquisitors very well might fight to the death, right? I had a Inquisitor last night in the middle of combat turn and use their last shotgun round shooting a hard drive, or second to last round shooting a hard drive, and then the last one shooting themselves so they couldn't be interrogated. But that's not a thing I would ever do with a Piranha. They would just be like, yeah, bro, it's all on the computer, just let me go. Like, take whatever you want, drop the gun. Like,
oh yeah.
So
I see him the same way, most definitely. All right, what's next on the list?
All right, the next one is getting into the fun part, the primetime players. So the players are a poser gang who use biosculpting to look like members of old sitcoms and TV shows from bygone eras. They're an extended family gang which protects their neighborhood and longs for a bygone time. The players are broken up into a number of different factions based on various shows. They're territorial and fiercely protective of their members. So there's a couple interesting things going on with that blurb, right? One, just the hilarity of a bunch of people from I Love Lucy, or shout out to Deshaun in the chat, the Bangers, who he threw a psychotic group of Big Bang Theory members, all of the grunt levels, were Sheldons, who whenever they got shot had a speaker that shouted Bazinga, with a monstrous 4-hex fat Leonard with a meat hook hunting down to demand the Sheldons to feed him. But the Primetime Players as a group are very much like 6th Street, right? You join them because you're hoping for something better, which is an interesting take in, that you see reoccurring within the Cyberpunk universe.
Yeah, and I see the Dagon Master. I have a faction of the Primetime Players called the Trekkers, who dress up like Star Trek characters and call their low-level grunts red shirts. I like that. That's funny. Yeah, I do a one-shot, an ongoing one-shot, and I have different players come in. I recently had Ellen from Roll to Cast in. Terabella plays almost every time. Cody Pondsmith's wife. And then Steve from Sirenscape comes in. But in that one, I did an episode where they encountered a poser gang that I guess technically could be, a division of the Primetime Players, because as you see in the description, there's, I imagine different sitcoms and groups that are all kind of within this mega, I don't know, almost organized crime group of Primetime Players. But it was the Tiger Kings, and it was like all the lower level ones had the mods to look like tigers with the tats, and I grabbed the image, and then I grabbed Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin as the main 2 leaders. They're always arguing. There's like an audio roll you can hear behind closed doors because they're always arguing with each other, but they run the poser gang based on a retro docu-series show from back in the day, obviously retro from 2045. But yeah, I love the idea of that. If you want to throw in some cheesy fun, like I know in 2020 they had like the Brady Bunch. I imagine that'd fit, within. But, it's borderline cheesy, but if done right, it can be a lot of fun. You can laugh at it and still make it rowdy and dangerous or whatever you want. But I don't know, poser gangs, especially Primetime Players, or when you get into actual like pop culture icon style things, you risk making it just full on comedy or whatever. And it's got to be balanced with some grit and some fucked up stuff or whatever. I feel to make it work, because sometimes I don't know, that can be a little bit too fun. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The Primetime Players are, like I said earlier, where you Cyberpunk Red is gritty, cinematic, and also a little bit campy, right? And this is a lot of bit campy, but you can make sure to drag the gritty and cinematic part into it. Like, think about the level of trauma that you have to go get surgery to look like Johnny Bravo because you desperately want to fit in and feel secure, right? Like, that's a path you can explore. Like, okay, yeah, you might think it's bad, but if you've ever heard of a concept called signaling theory, right? The idea of signaling theory is when you give somebody a signal and that signal is costly, it costs you a lot to give that signal, it's a more important signal. When you get biosculpted to look like this random person from a TV show, you're sending the signal to this gang that you are committed and you are in. And what you look like is irrelevant as much as what it costs you to say you can no longer hide that you're part of this gang, right? So really, it's you're showcasing how involved and committed you are to your gang and your neighborhood, because each gang's associated with a neighborhood. And there's some cool stuff for you to explore there. Or you can, again, just make, like one of the people on NCS did, a gang that's just various Mark Wahlbergs from his top 25 films. And one of them is transformed into Optimus Prime because they didn't actually have a full recording of the Transformers film.
Yeah, like Perkin in chat says, honestly, the grit of dispossessed Mr. Rogers, seeing him try to fit into life outside of the gang. I love that idea because of what you just mentioned about, like, in the neighborhood. I could see, like, a gang of Mr. Rogers that went through all that, like, walking around talking about their neighborhood and shit and, like, protecting it or something. Like, that could be kind of crazy. But, yeah, the Wahlbergs, that's another one. Like, you see how, like, it can be, like, crazy and wacky, but borderline full-on comedy in a sense. Like, it's a fine line. You got to, like, balance it as a GM, I feel, or give them the proper actions and what they say and what everything else that the session is about, I feel needs to balance that fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they could be doing, fucked up stuff, right? Like, exactly, and that could be the tone comparison where so much of the tone is generated with, like, there's wanton violence being committed by a guy who looks like JFK. Like, that's weird. All right, but like I think that's like the contrast that you can draw about how like strange and almost twisted Night City is, apart from being funny.
Yeah, like Gonzo saying Mr. Rogers would be the best rocker boy, super pacifist, and solving everything through rep standoffs and persuasion checks. I like that. Like, he's super nice. He's even still wearing that sweater vest or whatever, or that his cardigan thing. You know, he's like, you can catch him changing his shoes throughout the day and shit. Like, just, but he's just super nice, you know. All right, what's next on the list? What else we got?
Cool. The next up is the Reckoners. The Reckoners are one of several apocalyptic cults that sprung up after the war. They roam the streets, preaching the coming harvest of souls, recruiting from the homeless and looking for donations, often taken in the form of your unconscious body. A few are serious crazies who want to evoke the end times right now with blood and C4.
There's not a lot of information on these folks out there, is there?
No, and,
Nope.
and before we dive into this real quick, just to give these voice in chat, because about that primetime players and all, like Sesame Street, I love that idea. Like, gang, imagine them like done up, you know, completely Bozos style, where they go so extreme to look like a Big Bird and a Snuffleupagus and all these weird characters from Sesame Street. Clone High Gang, Nuclear Gandhi, that would be kind of crazy. Okay, back to where we were at. I just wanted to mention that because they got that in chat as we were making the transition, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Those are funny. So some dude in a garbage can, PWB says exactly. That's funny. All right, go.
So for Reckoners, I've used Reckoners on a run before. I like to use them as a very grimy street opponent, right? So Maelstrom is, in my mind, like too high level. They're, you know, really chromed out. The Reckoners are going to be the guys in leathers with pipes, you know, roaming the back alley of a combat zone, you know, mugging already poor people while also doing, some, you know, maybe some weird form of community outreach that's really more about like getting people to give them power. So I had a contrast of two scenes back to back, and Perk was on that run, of Reckoners going out into a crowd of like starving people and kidnapping young women to take back to their leader, while at the same time running a soup kitchen line in front of their church that they had taken over while somebody preached the end times, and they had to listen to this person preach their, you know, dark end time speech before these starving, hungry, diseased people could get some food.
It's kind of like when somebody offers you a free vacation, but you have to sit through like an 8-hour pitch for a timeshare.
Right.
Except worse.
No, they definitely have that the crazy side of that, though, when it comes to, like, you know, like you said, the dark days, the days of reckoning and shit like that. They're to me like what Inquisitors almost dabble in when it comes to vibe. When you start thinking about that sort of stuff, these guys like fully take it and run. Maybe like less intelligent about it, like you said, you know, mugging homeless people and shit, and just being a little crazy on the crazier side of that ideology or whatever. Definitely picture them more like that.
You take these guys, you do what Lobster recommended by making them early game enemies, and then you lace their prophetic ramble. Like, if you're actually running a campaign about like a big bad plot going on, right? Something bad actually is coming. Some brain-eating virus or robots or nuclear weapon, something, right? In session 1, you use Reckoners and you have them say a bunch of stuff that is coincidentally going to be true, but it's not because of any of their stuff. So you use them as foreshadowing early opponents, and then you phase them out just as you start introducing hints about the real threat.
I like that.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, and I think in the chat, a couple people are getting them confused with Reclaimers.
No, yeah. So Perk was on the run. And that I did Reckoners. I probably said Redeemers.
That's
as
what
I
it was.
confused
Okay.
the word, but that was
Yeah.
It's
no sweat.
So one of the other things with Reckoners is like that blurb there gives you, and just like Joseph said, gives you multiple layers to play with. You can have like weird, you know, street preachers. You can have people just mugging people. But you could have like a legitimate end of times blood cult, right? Like doing sacrifices and ready to, blow up a subway that's on the way from, the Beavertons or whatever, or Beavervilles, like as, to propagate the end of times. Or what if they, these are the type of people who are like not trying to make money, but you get a group together and they're like trying to poison the water supply. They're doing like Joker and Bane shit, right? Like trying to, destroy Night City. That's where I would source people, who were trying to like cause mass terrorism that wasn't necessarily backed by an ideology other than chaos and destruction.
Right. No, exactly. They're, like I was saying, a less tactful Inquisitors, where they're like anti-cyberware and tactful with it. These are like the end of days, but less tactful, like maybe a little more unpredictable, like a cross between Bozos and Inquisitors on that sense, where they have that cultist vibe to them, But I definitely think that makes them dangerous. What was that?
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, Joseph, if you're posting links in the chat, it automatically purges them so people can't see them.
That makes sense. It just didn't display that way for me, which is odd.
Yeah, when you post links, it doesn't call them on your screen.
Interesting.
Oh,
smart. Yeah. Basically, there's a Cyberpunk wiki that amalgamates content from various editions of the game. If you own Cyberpunk 2077 on PC at least, there's a secret copy of the Cyberpunk 2020 rules buried in the directory, which is another great source of information for lore, by the way.
Nice.
That's really cool.
All right.
Cool. What's next on the list?
So next up is everybody's favorite to hate, the Red Chrome Legion. The Legion is a neo-fascist hate gang. Young people united around various hate group ideologies. Uniforms and militaristic slogans are the rule. The Red Chromers will attack anything they think isn't right.
Right in quotes, they put that too, by the way.
I'm not going to blame Arch Alsorian Games for being vague on the specifications of neo-fascist ideology. I'm not going to blame them for that.
Unfortunately, there's all sorts of places on the internet you can learn more, so they didn't feel like they had to write a lot.
The work was done for them.
So, yeah, Red Chrome Legion is set up to be, obvious bad guys. I'm going to unequivocally say it. I don't have a space in my game for people who think the neo-fascist hate gang are the good guys.
Right.
And so,
preach.
But there's interesting stories you can tell with these people, and specifically with individuals in these groups, right? So you can obviously use them as people who roam ethnic areas and whatever, beat up black people or beat up people of different races, colors, creeds, commit that type of racial sectarian type violence using these uniforms and militaristic slogans, and so stopping that or beating them up, whatever, that's a good classic punk story, right? Is fighting against this explicit group. But it gets really more interesting to me when you start looking at telling the stories of individuals and how individuals got into being the Red Chrome Legion, right? So much of Night City is so absolutely shitty that sometimes you're just surrounded by people who are the ones that keep you fed and safe, and you marinate in that ideology. What if there's individuals in the Red Chrome Legion who grew up in this environment, and these are their brothers and sisters, but they realize that this is not what they're doing is wrong, right? Or the irony of different hate groups all attacking one another when these are all just people trying to survive, or heaven forbid, class consciousness occurs within the Red Chrome Legion and realize we're all poor and the rich people are rich, and why are we attacking other people of different races and creeds when there's all sorts of other stuff to stop us from being hungry? Like, these are types of stories that I think you can tell at the individual level around Red Chrome Legion.
Yeah, and I think Gonzo hits it there about the 2020 book listing them as like a militant skidhead gang that spent most of their time terrorizing those different from themselves. And I lean more towards that versus someone up there said you picture them more like doing soft bigots rather than Nazi reboots. Somebody said something along those lines. I can't see it in chat. I think it was previous. I was waiting, but no. See, I definitely think that they're less piranha when it comes to soft, if you get that. But I think more hard, like more. They're definitely real, and I picture them definitely more on the Nazi style. Just like Lobster was saying, like going around more militant style, like Gonzo said, the reference from 2020. Yeah, they're the reboot of like a skinhead gang meets Nazis militant style, and they're gonna be against anyone who's different. They're an easy gang to hate. Because of that, I would hope, like you said, no one at your table, no one at my table either. I think anybody that's like, no, they're the good guys, they're like, whoa, what the hell? Like, that's really confusing. But yeah, they're obviously the bad guys, because of that. They're fascists, and they're pushing that angle. And and I think it was Not Bob said something. There's nothing more punk than bashing some fascists. Hard to get more punk than bashing fascists. Yeah, it was Not Bob. See, I love that. And great point. Cyberpunk, So
there was a story that goes around sometimes. It was like a Twitter thread or something about a punk bar where this guy walks up and just sits down at the bar. He's just trying to get a drink and immediately gets, say, no, get the hell out. And it's because the bartender spotted some like fashy stuff on the vest. And he goes on to say, look, if you just let that slide, then his friends come along, and then suddenly, they are all hanging out there, and then suddenly nobody wants to come to your Nazi bar. So if you want to do something other than just say, okay, who are we going to fight? Well, we'll fight Nazis. You can always fight Nazis. You have our heroes have a favorite bar, right? And these fellows show up, and they're buying drinks, and they're just kind of hanging out, just being whatever. And then they slowly realize over the course of the campaign, oh my god, we are turning into a Red Crumb Legion bar. How did this happen? And that lets you have like a subplot about something that matters to the characters that could be unrelated to the main plot, but roots them in the world.
Oh yeah.
But they're so nice, but they look like you.
Okay.
So, one of the other things with Red Crumb Legion, so I've been on a kick of doing runs about like the dark corners of Cyberpunk, rather than just like kind of classic crime runs. If you've ever seen the show on Netflix, or American Netflix anyway, The Green Room, which is very explicitly about, or is a explicit thriller violent film about a punk band who plays at a Nazi bar and plays Nazi punks fuck off as a bit, and starts a series of cascading, escalating, very, very gory violence. That is easily a run you can do with a rocker boy and just bait him into playing Nazi punks fuck off at a bar that he probably shouldn't. Looking at you, Casey Corrosive, that is Not Bob's British punk rocker with the famous song "Everyone with more than 900 eddies is a cunt." So, but. So if you want to do something that's like that's horror-esque, horror thriller, you can absolutely use the Red Crumb Legion. Take a look at The Green Room, though not if you're soft of stomach, but that is a great inspiration for a rocker boy run, playing the wrong songs at the wrong compound.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually in real life caught in a funky situation like that back in the day. I don't know if anybody knows, but I was a touring musician. I've been in past bands back in the mid and late 90s, early 2000s, and did some interesting touring. One place I went to and we played at this bar out, it was up in North Florida, and we played, and some of the crowd was into it, some wasn't, and we were with another punk rock band that we're friends with. He's actually he streams as well. I forget his name. He visits theme parks and stuff, really big on YouTube. But anyways, we were, after performing and stuff, I hit the bathroom, and the bathroom was covered in SWAT stickers and stuff and all this like KKK propaganda. And I was like, whoa, what the hell? Then I started noticing behind the bar there was like these pamphlets about KKK. There was this skull and horns cattle thing out back when I went out back there, back when I used to smoke cigarettes, and I saw it up there and it had a SWAT sticker carved, and I was like, whoa, this is that type of bar. And then I started noticing how many people had like shaved heads that were in the crowd. I was like, yeah, let's get the fuck out of here. I didn't even, we had no idea. It was like completely crazy, caught in the wrong place. But yeah, anyways, that was just my little crazy skinhead fascist story.
Cool.
But yeah, what's the next one?
All right, the next one up is the Scavers. So the Scavengers aren't a gang per se, but the desperate homeless who squat in the ruined city zones left behind by the war. They scour the treacherous debris for saleable items such as copper, platinum, old tech, and even abandoned weapons. Many die doing so. Not least of all because these urban battlegrounds have been pretty picked over in the last 17 years, and the Scavers are constantly forced to dig deeper and deeper into unsafe terrain for anything of value.
Yeah, and just to back up real quick, because the chat came in later, Val Mulligan, my wife, says, I remember that place with a laughing emoji, because Val used to do all the touring with my band at that time. That band was named D-Root, but she used to run our merch table and stuff, so she was there. She got to witness that. Yeah, it was fucking crazy. But yeah, when it comes to these, let me see here. It looks like there's but yeah, when it comes to what is it, the Reckoners,
The Scavers.
or Scavers or Scavengers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, when it comes to them, and I've worked them into campaigns, the one thing I like about them is I feel like they're on that level of, desperation, but to me, that name, it is more of like a brand of, like if you were to say, these are all gangs, right? And then there's all these different types and styles of gangs within that terminology. So that's how I kind of picture them is, yeah, they're all at that desperate level of scavenging and out on the Badlands and coming in and taking what they can to sell what they can. But within that, I picture like factions or divisions, like some that do honest work, some that don't do so much honest work. I did a session, we brought in a Nino Gaming to play with our Team Nameless, our weekly ongoing, and they invaded a meat market. It was a long bunch of sessions leading up to this, but they ended up finding someone in the life path that was taken, being held in this meat market sort of place out in the Badlands, and it was a bunch of scavengers there, Scavers. What's the title there?
Scavers. Yeah, it's
Scavers,
just Scavers,
but
like a short.
Exactly. But you get the point. But they were, but these ones were, into that. They were into, taking people, obviously finding and selling whatever they could, but they were on the criminal side of it, a little more willing to bend morals and do fucked up stuff. Whereas I picture some other ones that they ran into through a fixer that they work with were running a huge scaver sort of depot out there, and it was for all scavengers and people to come in, and it was basically this dump site that was the size of like 2 football fields, real secure, but it was a place to come and trade random goods or maybe find things of the past and stuff. So that's a group I would picture, maybe a bit more moral, if you will, like, trying to do honest business within that, but still get away with criminal stuff. But that's how I picture them, more of a general label or community or idea within society, or almost class level within it.
Yeah.
But then
you're saying
divisions.
you've got combat gangs, and here's a bunch of combat gangs. You've got prank gangs, and here's a bunch of these. You've got booster gangs, and you're sort of saying, and then you've got scavers, and that's another like category.
Yeah, that's how I like to think of them, at least within in my campaigns. Yeah. How do you guys picture them? How have you guys worked them in?
So yeah, I think of it as in the exact same way. Along with the peers of Scavers is going to be like just groups of homeless people, who are gathering together to get by, right? Maybe doing mutual aid. Maybe they've built up just like a small community somewhere and bring people in and trying to feed them and stay safe from predatory gangs. Scavers are the exact same thing, but applied more directionally into almost the gold rush style scenario of the only way that I can feed my family is digging deeper and deeper into this, crushed morass of downtown Night City that got nuked, and getting risk of stuff falling on you or getting preyed upon or dying of radiation poisoning. It's not Bob, I think, says it really well, which is it's desperation is the number one driving thing, is people willing to do more extreme stuff to risk a payday that to the average edge runner might be nothing, but to them might be, food for a month for their family, which is worth, jumping into a radiation pit or whatever.
Right. No, yeah, desperation. I think that's a great point.
It's kind of unfortunate what ended up happening with the Scavs in 2077, where they're pretty much exclusively portrayed as, organ stealers. Because I think that the idea of desperation really is more at play here. And people, life is harsh. You don't go around ripping copper out of wires because you're lazy. You do it because, that's your lot in life. That's what you got. So I think that aside from, if you don't want to just use them as low-level mooks like the video game does, it's always good to do a story. If you want to do like a big picture story, a scaver found something, and now either they start out the story dead in the first 5 minutes of the Law and Order opening sequence, or they're on the run because they found something, and a bigger gang or corporate interest or a government, etc., is after them. That's an easy way to tie them in, and because whenever we're tying these gangs in, it's for a couple of purposes, right? It's for story, you gotta have an exciting plot hook, but it's also always an opportunity to open a window for your players into the reality of that world. So you could do a real has-nots story by starting with a scav who finds something, having them be like the MacGuffin that has to be protected, and then go from there.
Yeah. An idea is something like, imagine a scaver walks into a edgerunner bar and, quietly says, all right, I have something that I need some muscle to help me get to, but I know where an original Malorian arms is, right? Like, okay, cool. But they're now out on a limb. They say they're going to split it with you. But what's stopping you from getting to the thing and shooting them in the head? Nothing, except for you're a punk and not a horrific person. But are you? Like, can we use this to draw that contrast? Are you really a good enough person to split 5K?
Depends
or
on,
split 10K, right?
Depends on the players you're GMing,
Yeah, absolutely. But it's one of those, like, allow people to draw direct contrast by giving them the opportunity to be good at cost. That's what I always think of all of Cyberpunk, is like, you get to be good, but it's going to cost you something to be good. It's much more profitable to be evil. So how do we let you explore that?
Yeah, I love that. No, and it puts that moral conflict. It allows players to really be engaged and invested in their character when they start incorporating, moral conflict and balance, and then they start really diving into the motivations that they're role-playing, I think it's great. All right, yeah. Next one.
Sweet. Next up is the Steel Vaqueros. A nomad pack out of Salinas. Their ragtag convoys make the coastal highway runs from Santa Cruz agriplots to the southern cities. They take in anyone who displays skill, dependability, and who can keep up. Smart and relatively honest, they have supply deals with several reclaimer groups in Night City. Alright, so Steel Vaqueros is, I think, a good example of a sample gang for nomads, in terms of like what you can do and how you can use them. This group is a gang so much in the sense that they're organized around, controlling a territory and power, but not in the traditional way of extortion or killing people or stealing or whatever, but running a business and recruiting and bringing in anyone who can and wielding that power.
Yeah, what measure is a gang, right? It's originally just a group of people who band together for mutual protection. I think one of the most interesting things about the nomads in the world of Red is how powerful they are. By 2077, we're seeing a lot of marginalization kick in. In 2020, they were, sort of decried, outcasts, blah, blah, blah. But in Red, they are such a key part of the infrastructure and of the power and the economy and the power balance of everything that I think you can do a lot of interesting things with a group like the Steel Vaqueros simply by them trying to enforce their interests. They may not send leg breakers to take your territory, but if a gang is trying to raid transport in their area or a corporation is trying to move into their territory, they've got the muscle and the political and economic clout to back it up. So I think that they're a really good window into the important role that nomads play in the world.
Oh yeah. No, I think that this is the first taste of nomads being a gang, in that sense, that it's less focused on, like how you said, the importance of Nomad and Red being all about supply chains, transport, sea, land, air. They're almost kind of an honored group of people in that sense, because they're needed for survival, and they've kind of stepped up and they're running that. And you see, as you get to 2077 and roads and transportation, all these things are reestablished, they're not needed anymore, and they almost kind of resort to becoming gangs again. They're listed as that in the 2077 World Book, that Dark Horse one that came out. Talks about them transitioning and kind of heading towards gang-like activities, and the families being kind of considered that. And I can see that out of desperation. Once they're in Red, they're held up, they got all these great jobs for transport and all that, then all of a sudden, they took our jobs, they all of a sudden the corporate reestablishes society, travel and all that, all the luxuries of modern technology, and the nomads aren't needed for that, so they got to resort to criminal stuff. I think this gang is like the first taste of that in Red. They're the ones that said, hey, we could kind of conform and just be like other nomads and run this, but we're going to kind of, take all the ragtag, nomad randoms and put them all together, and we'll all work together to do whatever the fuck we want when we want. And like, it's almost like that nomad meets a gang,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you could easily depending on how you want to run your table and run your night city, right? The Steel Vaqueros could be what does anyone remember of the names of like the super fucked up nomads? The ones like who get outcasted, and Bob, you know this in the chat. What was the name of those
2020?
nomads?
They have
Yeah.
the Wraiths. The Wraiths is like their gang, but they've got a special name for
Yeah.
them as well.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so yeah, like you could, if you wanted a bad nomad
and
gang,
Shiv.
right? There we go, the Wraith and Shiv. Thanks, Perk. Those are the like you could make them Wraith and Shiv, right? And those are like the evil nomads who've all been outcast for doing bad stuff, and they round up and those are ones. They're like the equivalent of train robbers, right? They're robbing other nomad packs. They're doing blitzkrieg type stuff in their ground cars and Aerozeps and AV4s to go rob people and stuff. Or you could use them like a business that dabbles in non-business activities every once in a while when the times are lean. But it's I think they're kind of an open book or a blank slate, and with how important nomads are, it's hard to see a nomad group that can participate in the logistics business not do that because it's so lucrative.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it allows, like I said, some of that, more flexibility when you want to bring in the nomad element and not always have to have them about, honorable travel and transport and supply chains and this and that. Like this, you can definitely go towards these guys when you want a little more on the criminal side of all of that, I feel like. And when you want to diversify what they're doing as nomads. But I love the fact it's, labeled as like a ragtag group, so it's like all these randoms, so it can literally be anyone and everyone, as long as they're skilled. So that's great. What's next on the list?
Sweet. Next up is the Tiger Claws. Once under the thumb of Arasaka, the Tiger Claws have broken away and become a dangerous protector gang of the Asian community in Night City. They've had a significant role in rebuilding the sections of Japantown after the Fourth Corporate War. The Tiger Claws are known for their fast bikes, enhanced reflexes, and killer martial arts.
I feel like this is like if 6th Street is Little Europe's Guardian Angels in a sense of gang, the Tiger Claws are that equivalent to Japantown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're one of the, just like the, what was it, the Iron Sights, they're like an Arasaka paid gang,
Yeah. It's interesting because the Tiger Claws are actually represented as an Asian protector gang, and the Cyberpunk Red Book discusses Yakuza as like a separate syndicate. And so you could have interesting stories about Tiger Claws and Yakuza both determining themselves as protectors / owners of Little Japan, of Asian community, and Japantown, not Little Japan, and interesting interplays there about how how that power is contested, and how syndicates versus gangs work. Syndicates is probably an interesting discussion in and of itself outside of gangs, but
very similar in the sense that it's just a bit more organized gang or divisions of put together. But go on. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
A new money, old money sort of thing, where Yakuza is the old storied traditions, and the Tiger Claws are the new kids on the block who don't follow any of your stinking rules. And I could easily see the Tiger Claws being more autonomous, whereas the Yakuza groups have, longer lasting ties to overseas crime communities and such. And that would be, you would probably have internal factions within the Tiger Claws. Some of them say, let's be beholden to these other groups because they can give us a lot of power and influence and respect. Others saying that's going to destroy our identity and threaten our autonomy. You're always looking for the intra-gang conflict. That seems like fertile ground.
Oh yeah, I also like to imagine Tiger Claws as Bosuzoku, right? The fast street bike gang that's like running around doing maybe anti-nomad stuff, or they have a Uzi on their super cool bikes like an Akira. Now that's a type of a really cool aesthetic that not a lot of other gangs have that you can use for them. That is canonical.
It's funny because I just had in the one shot the Yakuza doing a funeral. It was a guy that the team had to go and extract. They're hired by David Ling Po, who as you know, is all Chinatown, so they couldn't name drop or use that as leverage coming into Japantown style shit. But when they get there, the person they're supposed to extract, it's actually his funeral. It's a dead body. They need to try to find a way to extract out of this big celebration because he's this other crime lord guy in the Yakuza. They're everywhere. They were tactful. They got it done, but it was kind of crazy. But yeah, I know I definitely feel that with them, it's more, Tiger Claws. I feel there are a couple ways played, like more on that, like you said, autonomous gang level, running the streets and more, very gang. Whereas I can see Yakuza more syndicate, more mob family oriented, like Joseph said, ties overseas and back to whatever home country and parts of Japan or things, whatever they have attachments to, versus Tiger Claws maybe being more Americanized in their gang mentality, less roots and traditionalism or big thoughts on all that, But I can also see, whereas like Yakuza's more on like the crime side because of, mafia style, thinking of their group or their organization, versus Tiger Claw. I can also see that being played as like how it is described, protecting Japantown, maybe using methods they have to, because everybody has to do what they have to do to survive, but they can almost be like that equivalent of 6th Street, right? Like the good bad guys, if you will. I could see them played that way as well, most definitely.
One thing that's interesting about both 6th Street
and Yakuza using Tiger Claws to do their dirty work. Just wanted to mention that Renegade scene because I could definitely see that as well. What were you going to say, Joseph?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point from chat. One of the interesting things about 6th Street, Maelstrom, and Tiger Claws is that there's some of the gangs that get highlighted in 2077. Okay. Now, as GMs, obviously, we're not beholden to that, right? At your table, it's your Night City, it's your Dark Future. But being able to see one possible trajectory for these gangs gives us some ideas, because both the Tiger Claws and 6th Street are portrayed as protector gangs, but by the time 2077 rolls around, we see them doing a lot of standard stuff, extorting businesses for protection money, and they're even mom and pop shops, right? They're not just saying, keep your big Corpo Mart out of here, we're going to protect our local shops. No, they're hitting up everybody for their cut, doing a lot of standard stuff, which in some communities, it's like, okay, well, we pay the local family, but they do protect us from getting beat up by roving gangs and stuff. So it's a fair trade. Whereas in other communities, we are in this iron stranglehold. So one thing that I find really interesting is when people start out with this idea of, we're going to band together for mutual protection based on something we believe in, but over time, greed kicks in. And if that is a possible trajectory in 2077, and we're playing in 2045, it's ample time to show the beginning of that process or the seeds of that process.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, and what is it, Zeppi, the Wang Feng Tong, or the Triads? Yeah, see, there David Ling Po runs the most dangerous part of the Triads of the Wang Feng Tong. I honestly think Talsorian forgot about them in the gang section. Honestly, no. See, they mention them if you go to where it talks about David Ling Po being the big exec that looks out for Japantown, but behind scenes, he's running criminal shit. Or Chinatown, sorry, Little China. And it talks about something along those lines, I believe. But yeah, they do mention them. But yeah, they don't get their own listing in the gang section. I feel like they could, but then again, I think like Lobster said a minute ago, you start getting the Yakuza and the Triad and things like that. It's like, are they just going to be thrown in with all the other types of gangs? Like I was saying, that blanket term gang, or can that be stepping more into like a syndicate, a crime family, and have more traditional roots mixed in with the types of shit that they do to survive versus like for instance, like certain mobs and stuff like, oh, we don't deal in drugs. You know what I mean? So there's like certain things, just like gangs have their certain limitations and ideals or whatever, I'm sure. But it just seems to me that when you start stepping up to some of these bigger things, it does become more syndicate, less gang.
Yeah, to me, when I'm thinking syndicates in general, and these very well may be Shadowrun brainworms that have followed me to Red, but it is the concept of a syndicate is they should be operating at much more of the white collar crime level rather than the blue collar crime level as a percentage of their income.
Oh, yeah.
So these folks should be doing things like money laundering and fake IDs and racketeering, whatever art thefts or manipulating securities, not just like robbing people with a baseball bat, right? Like that to me is the difference between the two. And I think Cyberpunk Red, especially with how unstable Night City is at the time of Red, it plays itself much more to low-level crime. But I think in a future supplement, when we get more discussion about corporate stuff in detail or high society, you can weave in syndicates in that world a lot more.
Yeah, and I think that brings a good point. Sorry to cut you off. Hold your thought, because don't forget what you're going to say. But I do want to say that let's do a future episode of Night City Live, because I want to do one on corpse, neocorpse, and custom corp ideas. And within that could probably interweave some syndicate and mob family talk and organized crime stuff. But what were you going to say there, Joseph?
Basically that. Like, a syndicate is an illegal corporation, Yeah. And given how laissez-faire things are in the world of Night City, the lines between a megacorp and a syndicate are fairly blurry, right?
In real life and in Cyberpunk, right? And I think it was, let me see the check. Someone said in there, it was Renegade. They're much better organized, I'd say, most definitely. And then Perk saying they've got their own lawyers and accountants. Exactly, so there you go. I think that's a great point to be made. What's next on the list?
All right. The last one for us is the Voodoo Boys. Major crime contacts in Florida and the Caribbean have been the beginning of may have been the beginning of the Voodoo Boys, a terrorist gang with ritual magic overtones, feeding their bizarre tastes by dealing primarily in non-synthetic drugs. But that's been changing recently, as real Haitians and other refugees from the decimated Dominican Republic have started to move into the area. These immigrants have taken offense at the so-called Voodoo Boys and have taken to expressing their displeasure by maiming victims and dissecting the dead with machetes, leaving body parts as warnings. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I like how they kind of almost set up this description. This is the one gang description where it's almost like a little mini scream sheet, right? Like they almost lay out a possible scenario or plot hook or something you can weave into your own plot or campaign, possibly by talking about their conflict and shit, and then stay tuned. It's like, I don't know, I like that a lot. The other thing I want to mention about them is they remind me of the whole Nomad situation when you look at going to 2077, in the sense that they completely evolve and change, not out of crime, not out of being a gang or whatever, but you see in that world book listed as like netrunners and stuff, so it seems like they went from street gang, like almost booster gang style Voodoo Boys, with a touch of poser in the sense of the voodoo, the magic, right? Like ritualistic, like they're very themed poser gang style, but still booster. I don't know, but it definitely looks like by the time they hit 2077, they're a gang of, the Voodoo Boys are netrunners, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because if you think of voodoo and like pseudo magic, your version of that in Cyberpunk is definitely programs and black ice and shit. That's your form of like magic. You're zapping, you're shooting hell bolts and shit. You know what I mean though. So, what do you guys think about Voodoo Boys?
My general thing is that what you're presented here is almost two gangs within that blurb. One is going to be almost what appears to be a voodoo poser gang, right? So it's a terrorist gang with ritual magic overtones. But then afterwards you have what appears to be an ethnic gang reclaiming the name. And it is primarily immigrants reclaiming a name and a culture and doing it with extreme violence. So you have two different bits to explore, as well as the interaction between the two.
And this is perhaps the only example of a poser gang being actual posers.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I think like Bob just says, I think 2020 gangs were posers using it to have a gimmick, while the actual Haitians take them over and wipe them out. And I love that idea, because it definitely seems like that. And that's like, stay tuned. It seems like that's what's in the process, or, happening in Red. But then you see, like I said, 30 years later, like it's very... If anybody has that world book, correct me if I'm wrong, they're completely described as like in the net. They're net runners, Voodoo Boys, Aqua says the Voodoo Boys poser gangs and the Voodoo Boys booster gangs war. Yeah, I could see that, like different people claiming Voodoo Boy title or whatever, maybe.
Yeah. And it is also interesting because if you look at so the first gang seems significantly less. Well, actually, never mind. I was going to lie. They're a terrorist gang, right? So what are they doing? And a terrorist gang with ritual magic overtones feels a lot like the higher level of the Reckoners, right?
Oh,
like
yeah,
they're
totally.
trying to commit mass violence for a non really clear reason. Though terrorist implies that they have some kind of political motive, but we're not really sure what it is. But if there's a bunch of new immigrants to Night City and they are true and honest adherents to voodoo as like the culture that they grew up in and worship, they're gonna start that war. So I think it's really interesting.
Okay. I'd love to see that portrayed as the terrorist posers being very cinematic, being very theatrical with their violence, and the people replacing them, getting rid of them, are brutal but like efficient. They're not about making it showy. They're just about moving in and taking care of business. And I love the idea of the people who shroud themselves in mystery and symbolism being terrified of these other people who are just really good at what they do and not fucking around.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree. Have you worked Voodoo Boys into any of your campaigns, Joseph?
I have not.
And Lobster? No.
I have not. I feel like they are so core to the plot of 2077 that if when I was running my game, I deliberately chose to emphasize aspects of the lore that connect the two games, largely because it's not like running a game in the Star Wars universe where the entire story is sort of part of the cultural zeitgeist already. Cyberpunk, with the game coming out, it introduced a lot of people to the world, and so I wanted to focus on some of the big lore aspects. Arasaka, Johnny Silverhand, things that are not, to those of us who have been aware of the game for longer, and for people who've been playing it since 2020, of course, but that's kind of cliche. Let's go into the other corners. Let's see some of the other stuff out there. But I was doing mine to focus on those main thread lines. And because the VDB is pretty heavily involved in the game, I haven't super involved, and in a very different way than they are in the Time of the Red, I haven't really touched them.
Yeah, I haven't touched them either, but way back in the day, way back in Cyberpunk 2020 days when I was just a kid, I had a module I played. I still have it. It's called Chasing the Dragon, and I want to say that one had Voodoo Boys in it. I'm trying to remember it, and I remember when I was playing, I wasn't GMing at the time. It was my friend Eric. We were back in, I want to say middle school or just getting into high school, but I think middle school. And it was Chasing the Dragon. I remember I was chasing a guy throughout the campaign, finally getting up to him. He kept getting away, but it was the Voodoo Boys. I'm almost sure. Any 2020 fans out there, if you've ever played Chasing the Dragon, let me know in the chat if I'm right about that, or maybe Google it for me. But yeah, I think that's enough chat about the ones listed. Again, anybody in chat has questions or thoughts about it, we can always mention it and backtrack. Same with all of us, Lobster, Joseph, anything comes to mind, mention it about them. But let's talk at least a little bit before we end this episode of Night City Live about custom gangs, making your own, because I feel like all the ones listed in red are great. They got great character, great ideas, but there's only 14 listed there. There was a bunch back in the old Night City source book for 2020. I'm hoping more are coming, but there's a lot of wiggle room. There's plenty of room in the city and around to create your own gangs, do what you want. That's not to say the ones listed aren't awesome, because they all have such individual style and are all motivated by different things that you can easily think of creative ways. Kitty! I saw Kitty Tail in Joseph's screen. I always say that every stream, every game. But anytime I see pets, I love doggies and kitties and stuff. But yeah, you can figure out ways to work them into campaigns very easily because of what they're motivated by and what they're doing. It's like a cat jaws like dun-dun, dun-dun, like a shark fin going by, dun-dun. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's going to jump up and hit Joseph in the face, pa, 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 and then run off. No, but you know what I mean. You can kind of think of creative ways to work them into a campaign based on what they're doing and what they're into and what the gang is, and by the description. I feel like that's what's great about custom gangs. Not just in the sense, like I mentioned, I made up that Tiger Kings one just to come up with like a pop culture reference for a poser gang for fun, but you can also work that in, like if you have campaign ideas and different things, Ice Cute. And, like different things that you have to do, like, okay, this one's all about drugs or anti-corp, or just like Inquisitors are great for anti-cyberware, right? When it comes into custom gangs, you can kind of reverse engineer that. If you don't have a gang that's set in red, but you know what it's about, or your campaign, or what the focus is, and you just make a gang about that if you need some type of conflict or thing to be about that in that campaign. And that's the beauty of creating your own custom gangs. But let's talk about, ways to do that, your thoughts on them, ones that you guys have created. I've got a couple others I could mention, but I want to hear from you guys most definitely.
Sure. So in general, when I'm thinking about making a custom gang, there's kind of the first thing that I want to determine is, am I treating them as part of the crime ecosystem, or am I treating them as a cinematic element, right? And there's different ways of thinking as to go about that. If you just want a cinematic element that you roll in like Team Rocket every once in a while to go fuck some shit up, and they don't actually need to have like an economy, you can kind of hand wave that away, you just need big personalities, cool. Give them a theme in terms of a goal they're trying to achieve. Give them a couple of big personalities in terms of names that people recognize, and some kind of color scheme or appearance that is iconic to them, and then just insert them when it's appropriate or not. When you're trying to do more crime ecosystem gangs, the first thing is like think about that kind of predator-prey relationship that we talked about earlier. Where can they get resources from, and who are they competing with? Think about the territory they own and how they control it. Think about how they make money and what makes sense. And then think about what draws the gang together. And I like to use that costly signals. The reason why ethnic gangs are so popular is because ethnicity is a costly signal. It's very challenging to change that. And so it shows your group, as part of a group. You can use other costly signals like biosculpting to show why they're associating together. But really think about the, economics drives everything around me. So,
I was just going to interject while you were on that point of it, that, definitely it could be, the means for survival or convenience or family. There's things, you can push, but most definitely, there's the typical and the, what you would base that foundation on. But I think, I think that the most important to think about is, location, and then what is kind of driving them, like their form, like you said, their form of income and trade, or what their, what is their purpose as a gang, and then their opposition because of that. And I think once you have what they're about, it's easy to kind of define what their opposition is. But again, I think the fact that you can create these gangs, it's almost like, reverse engineering in a sense that you can create them to be the answer to whatever you have in your campaign. Like if you have this going on and you need that anti, instead of having the custom gang and then trying to figure out, okay, this is what they're about, this is their conflict or their anti, maybe they're the anti to what you already have in the campaign, or maybe they're the conflict the team runs into. But that's the beauty of custom gangs, is you can create them however you want. I tended to, in my own, lean more towards, just because when I've done it, it's been more cheesy, it's been more fun, lean more towards the poser gangs and more towards like pop culture references and like, the hokey things that would bring them together or make it seem as a unit, even if underlining they were into drug dealing or something dark and a little more crazy. But other than that, I haven't really made too many. I made like a Nomad pack that was gang-like, but I haven't made too many like just kind of straight like booster gang styles. I've mostly pulled from existing lore when I've done stuff like that, unless it's just been some generic, like a bunch of kids squatting in a place or something. I'll come up with like a generic name or whatever. But
I think the point about cinematic versus ecosystem use is brilliant, especially when I found my design parameters change a lot when I'm designing for content versus just designing for my table. And sometimes in some projects that can sort of blur, and a lot of the concepts that work well for one work well in the other. And when you're specifically designing for content and you've got like a 3-hour time block and it's a produced show and all that stuff, the cinematic approach tends to take a lot more precedence. And all those elements you described, give them a clear goal, give them mascots, standout characters, put them in opposition, give them conflict. That's all phenomenal. And that's exactly, I just take those sort of elements and make sure I apply them to the existing gangs. I haven't created any new gangs yet, and that's largely because, again, I'm really trying to root this game in the mythology of the Cyberpunk universe to strengthen those ties. I think there's something to be said for taking the gangs and making them your own, especially where some of these gangs have a ton of lore you can draw on if you really want to be a stickler for detail. Others only have a short little blurb, and that leaves you a lot of room to grow and to take the Reckoners, for example, and do whatever it is that you need to do with them. I think that the economy system, where you figure out how they fit into Night City and how they interact with others, is going to be key. And I think that even when you're designing a cinematic gang, if you spend a little bit of time on those design aspects, like, it'll help. Every little piece you throw in there will help, even if it's not strictly necessary, and just help ground them. But I also think Night City's plenty big enough for a DM, if you really are missing something in the world, you can easily throw it in. We saw some examples in chat about all the players having like a Russian background language. That's a great time to bring in a gang specifically for that. I think that's the ideal reason to create something new.
Most definitely. No, and I think with the cinematic version, I think you're 100% right. It's good to at least give it a little bit of depth or foundation, even if not initially planned or played as the GM, because you never know what players are going to pursue and all of a sudden give depth to, and all of a sudden you have to quickly have that backstory or a little more to it maybe, or it becomes something they pursue. You never know, so that can always happen. And yeah, you're referring, I think it's Alda Breka, hopefully I'm saying that right, in chat. He said he made a Slavic gang for his home game because all his players gave their characters Russian as background language, and that's, yeah, I think that's what Joseph was referring to. But exactly, you know, it can almost be an answer or a solution or something you pull from Life Path or a reverse engineered sort of thing. But that's the beauty of custom gangs, is that you can create it however you want. And do whatever you want with it. But I'm definitely a fan of, no matter how you do it, whether just face value throw them in or something that's a bit more established into your world building lore. I think no matter what, I'm definitely a fan of, like what Joseph said, have a little, at least some back pocket history or lore to the ones, even if it is just cinematic or face value or thrown in, because you know you never know how it could develop.
I'm a sucker for doing a yes and for smart players who think of complex things, and I find that when I give hooks, I'm giving players hooks in the same way that players give GMs hooks when I describe how a gang operates, so that they can be more sophisticated than just shoot them in the head, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So if you're like, oh, well, you know, this new gang is Team Rocket themed or whatever, like, yeah, you could do it that they have, you know, taken a person with dwarfism and freaking carved them into look like Meowth, right? Like, sure, cool. They're iconic, they're loud, they're all something. But what if you find out that the reason that they operate off of Team Rocket is that the person who is their head executive worked for Network 54, and in fact has all of these brain dances that are actually like Pokemon's Kids Show brain dances that they use as conversion, but they also have like managed to tune them to where they're like XBDs and get people really super high, right? And that's their primary source of income, is they have this really unique drug setup of like cartoon BDs. You know, like suddenly now it's like, oh, well, I need a gang where I can get an illegal BD customly made. I can, you know, call the Team Rocket people, or oh God, let's frame this crime on somebody. Hold up, you know, look like a cat, right? Like you can do more when there's bits for them to cling to, even if it's kind of Tolkien style Next Mountain theory, where you just like give it a name to what they do. I'm gonna say, yeah, they do absolutely do Pokemon themed brainwashing BDs. Like, don't explain it any more than that. Just give somebody a hook to operate
Right.
on.
No, I love that. Yeah, and PWB, or Mr. Bind, as I like to wrongly call him, is he's putting together, or heading it up with our team and our community on the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord, creating custom scream sheets that any GM can use. We're going to start putting those together with mini stories and fake ads and, you know, all kinds of cool stuff, being put out by a fake Neocorp that I created in one of my one-shots called IMG, which is the indie media group. But that's what he was referring to. Anybody watching, listening, including both of you, fellow GMs, if anybody has short blurbs or for community submissions about gangs, anything for these scream sheets, he'd love to have them. But yeah, if you go to the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord, you'll see the scream sheet channel, and PWB goes by Ferris Bueller on there, and you can hit him up and submit your things. You can look at the requirements, but we'd love to showcase people. We're putting people's names as like media and as characters in them, so then people can use them as NPCs. Plus homebrew things like if you have techs that have made custom ammos and armors and devices, we can put those together as little ads in the scream sheets as if they're ads from a company promoting that new custom thing that you created or such. So it's a lot of fun. But check that out. Hit up PWB about that. That's what he was mentioning there in the chat. Yeah, Ferris Bueller is his name on the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord. But yeah, one of the other custom gangs I wanted to mention this, and it's a lot of fun, is, well, actually, man, I'm hesitant talking about it because I was going to work it in to some of my games. I don't know if I'm doing it for the ongoing or the one-shot, but I did kind of prime it a little if I wanted to. But I got the idea from Chris Hockabout. I did a whole interview thing for Cyberpunk Uncensored, the podcast. Chris Hockabout did all the original artwork for 2020. He actually did the original artwork for the Bozos that everybody knows, and a bunch of other stuff. The Four Horsemen on the beginning when you open with the 4 different styles of men right there on the top header. He did all that artwork. He's badass. Chris Hockabout. But check out that interview on Cyberpunk Uncensored on the YouTube. You can learn more about him. But we were talking about custom gangs, and he drew up one, and I love the idea. You basically plant a little box that maybe looks like a safe. I know my ongoing, my one-shot, both of them have that. They haven't been able to crack it yet. It's a high DV because it's very difficult because it's almost like a puzzle lock, but once they get it open, it sends out a beacon that's maybe silent, they don't see, but almost Bozo style, they start getting haunted by a poser gang called the Cenobites, or the Hellraisers if you want to. But it's that sort of puzzle box that basically draws them in, and they start fucking you up. But it's just a cheesy, fun thing to kind of throw in. But that's another custom gang idea, and you can kind of prime it with that fun little box that maybe they find during a session. Eventually they get it open, little beacon goes off, they have no idea what it's about, but then that's what starts showing up. Have you guys done any particular custom gangs you want to mention?
I have not. I've just been using the statted ones. However, one of the things that's after we talked about it and mentioned in the chat is really obvious hole in the red listed gangs is that there are no Netrunner gangs. So if you want people who are...
Oh yeah, I guess they're text. They talk about, what is it, the Brainiacs or somebody?
Brainiacs aren't in red.
Yeah, not in red. I thought you were saying, but in 2020 even they didn't.
Oh, sorry, I meant in red. I'm just talking about the statted gangs in red.
Sorry, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, so in the statted gangs in red, there's no, there's a lot of room for Netrunner gangs. If you want to do something like that, there's room for a more white-collar crime type gangs. So if you want to, bring in the Valentinos and keep them as, suave playboys and stuff, or maybe make them into like low-level swindlers, or if you want to get people into actually doing like surveillance white-collar crime, or manipulating financial stuff, like those are good spaces that you could use custom gangs in. Perk in the chat had their custom gang for Netrunners called the 404s. They ran out of New Westbrook, and New Westbrook was a corporate zone, so there's a lot of a lot of high-tech stuff that you could scavenge there, and you can break net stuff to go through them. So it's definitely something that you can use. Yeah,
no, I love that idea, and it's definitely the usefulness of custom gangs. And yeah, not Bob saying the Brainiacs mostly got wiped out by Rabbids. And I thought he was referring to 2020. And that's what I was saying about the Netrunner. But yeah, not in red, not at all. With the exception of, like I said, you can see how Voodoo Boys are heading in that direction. But obviously, with what it is, plenty of room for more gangs. So anything you do with custom gangs. And I do want to say this too. Anybody watching this VOD version of this episode on the Cyberpunk Uncensored YouTube, if you've created a custom gang or have any ideas, ways that they can be useful and thoughts on it, leave it in the comments. I'd love to see that. And maybe I'll reach out when we start kicking out some of the Scream Sheet stuff like I was talking about, and get you involved. That'd be awesome. But yeah, I think we covered Gangs of Night City. I think this was a great episode of Night City Live. Before I kill this transmission, want to everybody get a moment to say any final words. Not just about the episode, obviously, but, plug yourself one last time, tell people where they can find you and all that good stuff. But Lobster Falcon, you want to start that off?
Sure. First, thanks, Joseph and Rob, for having me on. And this was super fun, and it was always great talking to you. I also want to say, if you guys are, don't have a home game or you're looking for more games, come check out Night City Stories. You can find us on Reddit at reddit.r/Night City Stories. And you can come play lots of Westmarch style Cyberpunk Red games. we're always, of course, looking for more GMs, but we're also looking for players. So please come on by.
And anybody watching that's part of the Cyberpunk Uncensored community, they're an official partner with us. So if you're part of our Discord, you see how we have, GMs and players looking for each other to play Red 2020. We also have that West March channel. And if you go there, you'll see a direct link to Night City Stories right there. And you can go join some of their games and check it out. But yeah, Joseph, any final words here? Give yourself a plug.
For sure. Again, Rob, thank you for having me back. Always a pleasure. Lobster Falcon, great to meet you. You have a big brain. You have some great ideas that will be making appearances at my table. You can find me in particular across the internet, Tormented by Gnomes. I've got that username pretty much on lock. I'm primarily active on Twitter. Red Sky City is produced by Do Not Peak, which is twitch.tv/DNPeak. You can also find us past episodes on YouTube, and DN Peak is on Twitter as well. We have highlights, we have recaps of Red Sky City, which is our Cyberpunk Red actual play. And yeah, that should do it for us.
Oh yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I'm Rob Mulligan. Most of you know me. I'm the founder of Cyberpunk Uncensored. I'm constantly putting out, crash course tutorials in different series. The GM Tips series, this Night City Live. I've got a deep dive series where we're taking it beyond the tutorials of each individual role and doing more of an archetype, life path, preferred skill, a deep dive on each role. That series is just starting up as well. But yeah, just lots of Cyberpunk content. Almost every day I'm posting something between the podcast, the YouTube, the Twitch live streams. We're also showcasing other GMs playing. We also got the community blog with a bunch of free stuff. Let me see. Zeppy here says, could you quickly mention that we're starting a play-by-post system? That's right, on the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord. There's a play-by-post section as well, so people that can't commit to all the time or want to get involved heavily, they can do that play-by-post. So check out that channel as well. But yeah, we're just constantly doing Cyberpunk stuff. So I just ask everybody watching, make sure you subscribe and follow to Cyberpunk Uncensored, both on YouTube and on Twitch. And give our videos a like and a share. Show us some love. I would really appreciate that. We got the GM Roundtable coming up, this Wednesday, just in a couple days, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard. I've got my weekly ongoing Team Nameless going on right here, live stream, playing Cyberpunk Red. And then Saturday is the next episode. Every month, second Saturday of every month, we do the GM Roundtable. So that'll be going on this Saturday. And yeah. That's about it. I really appreciate you guys joining me again for more fun Cyberpunk talk, and we'll definitely do more in the future. I love having you guys on. So everybody in chat, thanks so much for contributing ideas. I see you in all the streams, and it really does mean a lot. We love talking about Cyberpunk, but I love involving the community and getting the feedback and ideas. You guys are awesome and creative, and such, so many good GMs and people in the community with great stories to tell, and it just contributes to these streams and series that we're creating. And I love it and I appreciate it. So, all right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.